Guys, I'm back again. I did a sort of like a little news section the other day, and now I'm actually going to bring you a deck list because, well, I finally put together duos. It's taken me 2 weeks maybe since the TCG release, but yeah, it's happened. The deck's actually been performing quite well with this build. I actually managed to test it out last night. Pretty much 4-0'd Revengers, but to be fair, most of that was me double critting them. So it doesn't really say much for anything. Of course, with the release of the Diva's Duet extra booster, we received a few Prism units, mainly Arya, Slaney, and there was a couple of others in there as well. So I will be bringing an updated Prism build as well at some point, when I've actually got round to doing that. Because I'm still missing a few things from the actual deck, because of where my build was a lot different to a lot of people's. I need to pick up a few extra bits. I think that's pretty much about it for anything before I really kick off. Yeah. Obviously I'm using the actual Duo starter, which you put it into Soul, choose one of your units with Duo in the name, return all units with the same name as that to your hand. This pretty much works with a lot of the stuff in the deck, because there's things that can draw you cards, give you extra power, or unflip you damage as well with the Grade 2 lineup. But we'll move on to that later. As you can see, I have the rear playmat, which is really nice because they put the, well, I'm not quite too sure what to call it, but I'll just show you anyway. They've got this bit on the left side, so it makes for a really nice place to put your damage, which is quite nice. The Coral one, unfortunately, had this on the right-hand side, so that was really good, was having a nice clear space to stick your deck. I kind of prefer it on the left because, obviously, damage zone. And it kind of looks like a damage zone on the old Sneak Peek playmats. Onto the trigger lineup. Always a good place to start. For Madeira. And for Shannon. In this deck, where you need to have multiples of the same name card, it's best to max out on as much as possible. If it wasn't for that, I probably would have gone 6-6 with the crit and draw triggers. However, I've gone for 8-4 for Liffey. I just preferred the art over the other draw trigger, whose name I can't... Tigris, that's the one. So I ended up playing this. And of course, 4 of the heal trigger, whose name I'm not even going to try and say. That's the trigger lineup. Again, I'm playing everything as 2 white, 2 black. Mainly because I didn't want to spend so much money on making the deck twice. I would if I could, though. Grade 1s. We'll start off with pretty much the most relevant part of it, which is the Perfect Guards. They're pretty self-explanatory in terms of what they do and what they are. They're also Prism units, so you'll see them again when I make the Prism video. Time to move on to the other grade 1s. For Sickler. Now her skill is basically when she's returned from the rearguard circle, you counterblast 1 and you choose a unit and give it 4k. Now this is pretty much similar to Prism Clear, who, when she's returned, you Soul Blast 1 to give a unit 4k. Of course, Sickler also has the additional skill that you can reveal 3 in hand and unflip a damage, which pretty much, if you have the 3 in hand, it makes her effect cost-free, which is pretty nice, especially because she's pretty good on the break ride turn, if you can fulfill that, or if you bounce it along with a Rika. because of course the deck doesn't really have much power play out of Mia alone, because you end up making unboosted columns, which can be an issue. I'm also playing 4-piece. A very similar skill to Sickler when she's returned from rearguard circle to the hand. Counterblast 1, draw a card, and if you can reveal 3, you unflip a damage. Again, having multiples, which is kind of easy in this deck with a certain grade 2 card. You can easily, well, I discovered that you can draw 3 for no cost on the Breakcry turn just by having 3 of these at any point. It's a bit silly, but we'll go with it. Unfortunately, this deck doesn't particularly have a very good grade 1 ride apart from Sickler, because a lot of it is 6k or under. So it can cause a bit of problems, and you do end up with only 18k columns at best. Well, 15 to 18k depending on who's on your rearguard. And lastly, for my grade 1 lineup, Tukura. Basic damage on flipper, Soul Blast 2 and turn 2 damage face up. This is pretty good to give the deck longevity, especially after your Breakcry turn, which can take at least 4 counterblasts, depending on what else you have on board and if you want to activate optional skills, of course. The only other deck that I play a similar card in is Blue Storm, which I will eventually bring you once we get Fighters Collection. Unfortunately, by the time we get Fighters Collection, we'll also have Legion in the TCG, which kind of makes the whole Blue Storm build that I had kind of irrelevant, and it will probably be Tetra Burst Dragon. Because of course in Blue Storm, where I've been playing Mouse in Reverse, use up 3 counterblasts, and this gives it, cards like this give it a lot more longevity for future turns. On to the grade 2s. I'm playing Force Seodaria. Again, 12k attacker for duos. She does talk for herself. It basically means on the Breakcry turn you can still at least attack into most vanguards. Anything that's 9k, because you don't have boosters, it's very difficult to really go for anything. I mean, you can hit into rear guards most of the time, but eventually they'll probably let the rear guards go anyway, and then you can't hit the vanguard unless you've managed to trigger check. I mean, yeah, okay, trigger checking is a thing, but you're not always going to hit triggers. That does happen. For Roan? Roan, I believe, is basically the heart of this deck. Well, not just because her name is Duo Mini Heart Roan, but she has the skill of counterblasting 1 duo. When her attack hits a vanguard, you choose a Bermuda Triangle rearguard, return it to your hand, and search one with the exact same name. Now, this can prep you for turns on end. Unfortunately, she does use a counterblast, and it's kind of hard to get that back. Especially because if you do, you need to go to 5 damage to even limit break, really. But of course, she can get you multiple copies of Seodaria, which of course helps you in your Breakcry turn. Multiple copies of Peace or Sickler, because again they have additional skills when you can reveal 3 of them. So Roan can help get multiple copies of them. Or she can get you another copy of something just to discard for Riot, because Riot needs to discard 2 of the same name. Roan, of course, works well with Peace, and she also works well with the next card, Rika, or Rika, however you want to pronounce the name. Unfortunately, she's only 8k, the weakest grade 2 in the lineup. However, when she is returned to the hand from the rearguard circle, if you have a Bermuda Triangle Vanguard, when shouldn't you, you can Soul Charge 1, choose a card from your damage zone, and turn it face up. Now, this obviously means With Roan, you search another one of this for no counterblast, but you do lose a card from deck, but that's fine. Again, you can call this out on the break cry turn to get back a counterblast, and then call something else instead of this. There's so many ways that you can play around with bouncing in this deck, especially when you've got things like Rika and Peace and Sickler. And of course the starter also helps. It's basically the duo version of Weddle. And finally, onto the grade 3s, which are probably the less important part of the deck, probably. But for Mia, she has the skill that when she is ridden, she's obviously the duo's break ride. It gives the Vanguard obviously 10k, and the skill of Counterblast 1, when the Vanguard attacks, return all Bermuda rearguards to your hand, and choose 2 Bermudas from your hand and call them separate rearguard. So in a sense, it kind of works. It's a little bit like Ethics Buster Reverse in the sense of what this kind of does. I mean, some people have been trying to compare this to Blouse, but to be honest, this is nothing like that deck. That deck is just insane. Thanks, Bushy Road. But of course, following in with Bermuda Break Ride, 4 more units, well, rearguards, she becomes 13k, which is slightly underwhelming because, considering Link Joker's quite big at the moment, you're never really going to want to get this off. Although Mia does, however, slightly counter Link Joker by the fact that she does return everything you have to hand, which is probably her most redeeming feature. And she does allow for a guaranteed 8 attacks, providing you don't hit into a heal trigger during the drive check. And last but not least, for the grade 3s, we have 4 Riot. Now, in Prism I used to play 3 Labrador, because I never really wanted to see it early game. I wanted to keep break riding on break ride, because Vert has massive longevity for doing this, because of where she will always replace cards. Well, she always replaces herself. And it meant that you could keep pushing with a 31k Vanguard until your opponent can't stop the Labrador. Unfortunately, in the new build, I kind of have to go up to 4 Labrador because there's nothing to fill that 1 card slot. But Riet's skill, Limit Break 4, Counterblast 2, at the end of the battle where she's attacked, you can choose 2 duos with the same name from your hand and discard them, and restand for plus 3000 power. And she also has the additional skill of Soul Blast 1 when it attacks. You can choose a Bermuda and return it back to hand. A duo rearguard, sorry. And return it back to hand. Of course, this works in well with Rika as well, because you can unflip the damage, which might give you the limit break again. There's a lot of ways, as I said, there is a lot of ways you can play around combos in the deck. Riet is obviously the main driving force behind duos in terms of what they do, and she also has the same artist, well, original artist of Hatsune Miku, which a lot of people will refer to this as the Miku deck. Unfortunately, Bushiroad have already done this in Vice Schwartz, where there is actually a Project Diva deck. So if you want to play Miku deck, that's where you go. Anyway, as I said, I'll bring you Prisms at some point, when I've actually managed to get around to doing that. But I've got set 15 stuff that I need to get in. So eventually there will be a deck list for Drag Ruler, Venus Lucier, and hopefully at some point Blue Storm. What build that will be, I don't quite know. But I do have a lot of things that I do want to bring you. And I also need to do an updated Musketeers list. That's another thing, because I haven't done anything since before set 14. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm still kind of toying around with this deck anyway. I'm just trying to look for something that looks good on paper and works really well. But this has been working pretty well anyway. I think the only thing I would probably change, if anything, would be Peace to Piranha, which is the 10k grade 1 attacker. But other than that, there's not really much I want to change. I mean, I've seen lots of builds of this, and most of them seem pretty bad. I've seen one which ran no Seared Area and played Thames as the other grade 2, and didn't use Mir as the brake ride, which was really awful. You just couldn't do anything. But yeah, enjoy.